This is going to be a panel discussion about the challenges and the opportunities on bridging the generation gap. This is an important topic we should talk about and make use of the opportunities. We have very accomplished individuals amongst us today to talk to us and share their knowledge and experience with us. And this is a first step of our ongoing effort to bring to you many such events. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome Miss Vandana Kumar as a moderator of the session, and Dr. Vijay Susrala as a director of the whole session. Vandana Kumar is a publishing executive with a 34-year track record in the industry. She leads in India Currents Foundation as a president CEO. As a new immigrant, she co-founded India Currents magazine in '87 and published award-winning print magazine from April '87 to 2017. Fully digital today, it can be viewed by everybody in the country now. It's indexed as Nexus and Ethnic Watch database. She has also won several Asian American Hero Award and also Business Leadership in Business Award, California Legislative Assembly. She cares deeply about social justice and was willing to step in and then help us out with moderating the session. So we welcome her. Thank you, Vandana. And Dr. Vijay is well known to us, and she has already provided a couple of webinars for us before when we started the whole session. She's a clinical psychologist practicing in Chicago since '95 under the name of Self-Improvement Through Awareness, SITA. She specializes in mood and anxiety disorders and attention deficit hyperactivity and post-traumatic stress disorder, and so many of them I can list. She has done talks on several topics and over 40 presentations she has given. Without much ado, let me invite Dr. Vijay to start the process and then start talking about what we are going to talk about today.
Good morning, or maybe just about good afternoon to you all. Gives me great pleasure to speak to you about a topic I've been thinking a lot about. Thanks to NorthSouth Foundation for adding this component of bridging the communication gap to its already amazing work. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts. I've been providing clinical psychology services since 1990 in USA, and before that in India. So I worked with Indians in India, Indians in America, and non-Indians in America. In the last 10 years, however, slowly and steadily, Indian clients have increased to a level today, 65% of my practice is Indian. That's really amazing because there was a time when I had 0 Indians. So during these years, I made some observations on this topic, and I'm happy to share them with you. Please be aware that these are generalizations, and I'm sure there is always exceptions to the generalization. You can come up with individual examples and experiences. Now, what I observed is that, and I'm sure you agree with me, that Indian parents' world revolves around their children. They will move heaven and earth for them. They move from state to state, from city to city. They do anything to provide for their children. They want them to be successful, educated, wealthy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Education worked for them and made them successful and wealthy, and they want to lay the same path for their children. Indian children are intelligent, privileged, educated, talented, are well-rounded and recognized. But the other aspect to that is they're also very stressed and pulled in opposite directions. The dominant culture teaches independence in thinking and action and personal responsibility. The Indian culture teaches obedience to parents and elders and responsibility towards extended family. Now, these opposing values and the stress that comes from it, I see in my office on a daily basis. In fact, of the 65%, more than half are children, middle school, high school, college, and even those who are working, born and brought up here. I've been thinking about how a synthesis can occur between these two sets of values so that the stress on both the parents and the kids can be reduced. And so far I came up with only two solutions. One is education and the second one is listening. I believe that if these two things can be somehow inculcated in both parents and children, I think we can have a very active dialogue about how to put these two sets of values together. So if you look at developmentally, very young children are very close to their parents, especially mothers in this culture. Clearly, they're insulated from the cultural influences of the dominant culture because most of the time, very young children are at home. They learn their language, they learn to speak their language. Now, once they start attending school, they're much more exposed to American mores and practices. Now, through pre-adolescence and adolescence, naturally peer group dominates, and they want to identify with them and develop an identity of their own. Now, at this point, kids have a lot to talk about. And I think this is where the education and listening comes into play as far as the parents are concerned. The kids are trying to make sense of both the cultures and their place in it. And I think how parents manage this phase determines whether or not the communication breaks or builds. The top-down approach that immigrant parents use becomes a source of conflict. Once the communication, that's what I noticed, once the communication issues start, everything becomes a topic of contention. So the major points of conflicts are choice of clothes, choice of friends, screen time, type of language they use. You know, I have seen parents rolling their eyes at their kids when they dress, you know, saying that, is this what you're going to go out in? So comments like that, you know, the kids get very upset about because they're desperately trying to fit in with their friend groups. Choice of friends, if by chance a kid comes and tells the parent, oh, do you know that, you know, Mary uses marijuana, immediately the parent says, stop talking to her. You know, I don't want to come into our house, I don't want you going. So these kinds of things, I do want you to know that my sample is a little skewed because, you know, people come to my office with problems. Having said that, I also noticed in the community with friends, relatives, they call me up and they want to talk to me about it because I'm a psychologist. I see this across the board. So what time do they sleep, how long they sit in their room, whether they should come downstairs and read their book or whether they should do their work downstairs facing the screen towards the parents so that they can keep an eye on it. You know, all these are constant points of contention. What food they eat, what devices they use, what language they use towards each other. If parents say that when the kids are going out, if the parents say drive carefully, the kid says, my parents don't trust me. Whereas back home, that was not how we felt. When my mom told me, hey, drive carefully, I just thought she's anxious or she's concerned about me. But the interpretation of language is extremely different in this culture. Other examples are a lot of kids, when they're asked to make a choice, do you want this or that for dinner? They'll say, I don't care. And the parents have a really hard time with that phrase, I don't care. They say that, that's very disrespectful. Another example is that one of the kids that I know, she texted her dad, hey, can you come up and help me? And he got very offended. What is this, hey? And she said, I thought that was something you use with close people, So, and then please and thank you usage. Parents want kids to say please and thank you all the time when they go out, but they themselves will not say please and thank you, and they feel that they really do not need to say that. Get a little water. So language is a big part of conflict. The other thing, of course, as we go on, screen time, devices usage, what time they have to switch off their phones, staying out late. Religion has become a really big, the more conflict there is in the family, the more they fight, the kids fight about religion. When there is less conflict in the family, they are more open to the religion of the family. But if there is more conflict, they want to stay away from the religion. That's another thing I have noticed. Friendships with the opposite gender, staying out late, dating, and substance use. Many a time I have to tell a parent of a college-going student, having a drink is different from getting drunk. Having a drink is different from being addicted to alcohol because they're so scared of that. So language is a really big part to this. Parents' body language, facial expressions, guilt-producing statements are something that kids talk a lot about. From a psychological perspective, there are three types of attachment. One is secure attachment. If parents are emotionally attuned, give a chance for the kids to talk and be patient with them and respond to them in a manner that makes sense to them, these are the kids who have a secure attachment. And as they grow up, they have more self-confidence. They have the ability to regulate their emotions because they've been listened to and involved in dialogue with the parents, and they have better relationships. The second one is anxious attachment. This is the type that comes often to my office, where caregivers are inconsistent in their ability to be responsive. Now, so besides this, when there is so much argument and issues of contention, an anxious attachment, these are the kids who grow up doubting their sense of worth. They're scared of rejection. They want reassurance. They want approval. They have difficulty managing their emotions. So with all good intentions, a lot of parents, because of the conflict in culture, lead to anxious attachment. And of course, the third one is avoidant attachment. This is a general lack of availability. There is abuse here, physical, emotional, sexual, whatever the abuse. And these kids grow up to be mistrustful and overly self-reliant and rejecting of other people, not developing relationships. Now, kids are, so when I said we need to be educated about how the brain grows, the child's brain grows. very rapid growth during childhood, and there is neuronal pruning. So a lot of changes are occurring in the kid. The second thing to understand is there are developmental stages kids are going through, and the developmental stages are a little bit different in India and a little bit different here. They're kind of similar, but the emphasis is a little bit different. We need to understand that because kids are developing and they're trying to develop an identity, and these kids are trying to make sense of the two cultures. It's not easy to do that. They're living in two different worlds altogether. A lot of kids with anxious attachment will have double lives. There'll be one person with friends, there'll be one person in the house. The other thing is the mental health issues are something that all parents should be aware of. Half of mental disorders are manifested by the time the child is 14 years old, and 3/4 are manifested by the time the person is 24 years old. So this is extremely crucial time, and most of the time Indian parents are not aware of these mental health issues. They don't recognize, and if they do recognize, they give it names like laziness, seeking attention, those types of terms they use. And this is much more devastating to the child. And then now the added layer of technology where the parents are becoming completely irrelevant. So I would like some course that includes how the brain is developing, what the developmental stages are, what the two cultures are, the parental pull and the dominant culture pull, technology, mental health issues, all these things together, I believe must be taught to the parents. And I cannot tell you how important it is for us to teach listening skills. It is, I'm appalled, both in the office and outside, how parents simply do not listen to their kids. If that simple thing is done, although it is simple, I have to say that it is a rare skill and it is a difficult skill, but it is not impossible to learn. All of us can learn it. So I think a systematic understanding of how people should be listening, not just waiting for the other person to finish so that you can jump in and give your perspective, not paying attention. So I think something like that is also very important. I all the time tell parents to draw very, very wide boundaries, to let go of majority of things, like, okay, the shorts are not below the knee. Okay, they're above the knee, no big deal. So I try to show them that majority of things you can let go. Keep your mind on a few things. The smaller the list, the better it is, and focus on those things. And we can have a dialogue about what those things are. After all, we are training our children to be world citizens. And if I can keep my focus on how can my child be a citizen of the world, I think these little things can be rearranged. Now, I don't know if my time is done. Is it? If that is the case, I'm going to stop right now.
Yeah, let's.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now I would invite Ms. Vandana Kumar to start the panel.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I think I want to piggyback off what Vijay just said. And a lot of the problems that you described are common to all parents. It's not specific to Indian parents. All parents are worried about your kids staying out late, for spending too much screen time, for wearing clothes that are not appropriate. But I think being Indian American adds a new dimension. And in our magazine, actually, over the years, this idea of handling this dual identity of being Indian at home, American outside, has been shared with so many people over the years. So it's a subject that I'm very familiar with. I'm also a parent that has raised children here. So a lot of it resonates with me. I think, I don't know who are the people that are actually watching. Are they mostly parents? Are they mostly kids? But I'm going to assume they're largely parents here. I think we need to recognize that parenting is an awesome responsibility. And it's just one of those, you have a life that you're in charge of. And you have no training. You don't get a certification to become a parent. You don't get training like Parenting 101 that these are the things you need to do. Or when you have a baby, when you have a teenager, we are completely ill-equipped. Actually, we are ill-equipped as first-generation immigrant parents because we also don't have that support structure to lean on. So what do? We are frozen in time. The time that we left India, the India that we left, or perhaps the India that an ideal that lived in our heads. This is how it should be. And we try to recreate that for our children here. It doesn't work out. And Vijay, you gave such excellent suggestions for parents. I hope that the NorthSouth Foundation actually sort of takes a lead in this, because you've taken the time to and given the space to have this conversation, and it can only benefit the community. So my 2 cents worth, but I'd really like to, my job here is really to facilitate a conversation between our young people, and I think one of them disappeared from the screen, but for the listeners, I'd like to introduce our panelists who are here today. I'll start with the young one, Aditya Kansal. He's a 16-year-old and a junior at Ashland High School. He's a student, scout, athlete, and musician. He plans to study law and political science while training to be an officer in the US Army. He has a passion for service and hopes to extend that passion into his career. While some of his interests include rock climbing, playing the guitar, and working with and leading others. I have a quote from him. He says, "My education within and beyond the common curriculum has always been a crucial part of my life." Our other panelist is Kavya Shivashankar. She's a medical student at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. She earned a bachelor's degree in neuroscience from Columbia University in 2017. Kavya has been involved with the NorthSouth Foundation since 2002, when she began competing at her local Kansas City chapter. Over the years, she learned the tools that paved the way for her to be crowned champion at the Scripps National Spelling Bee in 2009. Kavya continues to be involved with NorthSouth Foundation and joined the board in 2019. Bravo.
Thank you. And
Kavita.
sorry, I am here. I'm not able to join on video at the moment, but I'm here.
Okay. And representing parents, we have Savita Raji. Savita has been a volunteer at NorthSouth for almost 18 years. From the time her 2 sons participated in the NorthSouth competition from kindergarten all the way through high school. She has a master's in computer science from Tufts University and the executive director of a nonprofit organization for the disabled called Samarthanam USA. She's currently the director of media and marketing at NorthSouth. Yay for volunteers, because they're the lifeblood of any organization. And our other parent here is Dr. Balu Natarajan. He's the president of the NorthSouth Foundation. He's also the chief medical officer of Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care, the largest privately held organization in the country, which supports terminally ill patients and their families. He has the distinction of being the first Indian American to win the Scripps Howard Spelling Bee National Championship in 1985 and leading the way for so many youngsters to achieve this honor in the years thereafter.
Wow.
So all of you panelists, welcome. Since the subject that we're talking about really is communication, and why don't we try and start with something to understand what's working? Where do you feel that there is a good level of understanding with your parents? Let's start with the young ones. How about you, Aditya?
With having a good level of understanding with parents. So we both understand, and I'm thinking specifically about me and my parents. I think we all understand what's needed, meals or things for school, basic activities. When it comes to more personal wants or my friendships with people or just my other extracurriculars, sometimes there can be a gray area of what's understood. But between me and my parents, I feel as though there's a solid understanding of kind of just the basic necessities to go through day by day of what's needed.
Okay. How about our next young person, Kavya?
Sure, absolutely. I think that having a good understanding with my parents is always a work in progress. I think those lines of communication always have to be opened because new things will always come up, and being able to share that information back and forth, that comfort, I think is what helps bring the good level of understanding. So, things are always going to pop up. There are different areas of contention, but just being able to sit down and say, okay, we need to talk about this, and knowing that there's a space to talk and to listen is what creates that understanding.
So I feel very heartened by hearing your responses because there is a starting point that you're both talking about is already at a good place. How about you, Savita?
My parenting style has changed. So with the kids, so when they were younger, it was more like, I teach them, or, you do this, you do that. And then as they grew older, probably in middle school, like Vijay was saying, we were frozen in time. I brought the values that I grew up with, you're not ready emotionally to be dating, even if your other, friends are dating. So you can't do that, don't do that. And then actually my son interpreted that as don't talk to girls. So, it was, there was a, bit of misunderstanding over there. But as they got into high school, I realized that, and they also, are openly have pointed out that telling them to do this or do that does not actually fly. It's not a good way to communicate. And so it's been a learning curve both ways. So they have taught me how to communicate with them if I want them to respond to me, or if I want them to be able to come and have an honest conversation with me, that I should provide an environment that is conducive to that. And it is a work in progress, and we continue to develop that. And I think I'm actually happy at the fact that I've kind of unfrozen that time that I came with, and have been more accepting and open to having better communication modes and listening a lot more about what they have to say.
Bala, you're at an interesting place because you grew up here and now you're parenting here. Would love to hear from you. What's working?
Yeah, I grew up here, right? My parents emigrated in 1970 and 71, right? So talk about being frozen in time. And my wife was born and raised in India. And so I'm surrounded by immigrants, and so are my kids. But what's worked for us really is spending time. And so what I mean by that, right, is, we're not a house where we just, focus on studies. Like we take the kids to ball games, and we go on ski trips. And, I learned downhill skiing at the age of 45. And now we go on trip, which is not easy, by the way, but now we go on trips with the kids and we take multiple families. And I'm the only adult who skis with them on the hard slopes, and the kids are in charge of the route we're going to take. And so then dad has to follow, which is really interesting. And they're like, come on, you can do it. And just that empowerment, that kind of reversal of roles really does a lot, right? And so we have been able to develop, the boys are now 12 and 15, but we've been able to develop this understanding of, I trust you with certain things, and I'm putting my life in your hands, and there are other times that I need you to put your life in mine. And that really fosters bi-directional respect. And we've really, especially this last year during the pandemic, made sure to spend time, watch political or satirical comedy together, lots of group hugs. We've really kind of taken this forced time to be intentional with one another. And that means some compromises to some degree, right? If you actually watch satirical comedy together, that means that there's a lot of cussing and swearing. But if you actually allow your kids to be a part of that, they start to respond with adult-like conversations, and it really opens the door to a deeper bond and a deeper relationship. And so we've gotten to the point where, because there's a bi-directional respect, that awesome, scary, awesome parenting has really become a really enjoyable, awesome part where we can have a discussion of, all right, look, I need to tell you this because this is my responsibility as a parent. Now, do you want me to be your buddy, or do you want me to be your parent and do my job? And when it's asked that way, really 4 times out of 5, the response, is, no, I know you got to do this. I'm really mad that you have to do this, but I know you have to do this. And I think that bi-directional, respectful relationship, as it is evolving, has really been a treat for all 4 of us in this family.
Nice. Actually, you're reminding me of something that happened with me too, which is, when my children were 12 years old, I actually lost my husband to cancer. And suddenly I was a single parent of 2. I have twin boys who are 12 years old, just graduating middle school. And it was a very fraught time. I mean, parenting is fraught to begin with. Let's, go with that. And what you just said just reminded me of that, to say that I actually told them, I said, hey, guys, I've never been a parent before. I'm sort of learning on the job. This is a conversation I had with my kids. I said, so I'm going to make mistakes, because I've never done this before. There hasn't been something that would teach me. So I will make mistakes. I will probably, hopefully learn from that. But if there are any issues, the one thing that I want you to know is that I love you unconditionally. And that's the place that you need to go to anytime you feel like, hey, mom's making a mistake, just doing something. You need to just go back to that point and say, oh, tell me where I can make changes, where I can. And I think that has been an amazing thing for us as a family, because we learned to talk to each other, calling each other out, and I have to be okay with it. Mm-hmm. And your just words about that just reminded me of that. Hey, I think we can all learn so much from each other, and even from our children, because they have exposure to a space that we have not been exposed to. I'd actually like to hear from Aditya and Kavya. Like, what would you like your parents to know about you? I don't see them on the screen anymore, but I'm assuming they're here.
Sorry, I'm still here, but I'm happy
I had to make
respond.
a quick costume change.
Aditya, you're welcome to go first.
Yeah, it looks good on you, Aditya.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I was thinking about that question, and I feel as though there's a lot that they think they know about me. There's a lot that they do know about me, and then there's a lot that they don't know. But I think I've come to an age where I want to be able to make mistakes and get hurt, and not have to, and not have them kind of rushed. Like, kind of let me get back up on my own, and that doesn't mean just physical mistakes. I mean anything really. And so, you know, that's kind of always been a struggle with me personally, is building that sense of independence, because I'll tell you straight up, my parents are just not ready to let go. And I know they're watching this right now, and they're probably downstairs laughing. But that kind of struggle for independence was always one thing. But it's not that I don't love them. It's not that I don't trust them. It's just I'm at a point where I need a little bit of space to grow into my version of the individual that I want to be, and not their version, because they've raised me for the last 16 years, and I've got as much of them as I can inside of me, and now it's like I got to build my own parts.
Nicely said, Aditya. How about you,
I think
Kavin?
also what I have to say is very much in line. I think the one big difference is that now that I'm kind of in my well into my mid-20s now, I think that relationship has changed a little, and so my parents have come to understand a lot of those things about me. One of them is, you know, kind of the independence. Something that was mentioned earlier is, you know, my parents would do anything for me, you know, to help me. And sometimes it's having to say, you know, I know, you know, if you helped me, things would be done well and I would be all set. But sometimes it's wanting to do something myself and know that, you know, I'm going to make a mistake and it's going to be fine and I'll learn from it. I'll live with it and it'll be okay. And so I think kind of that is what I want my parents to know. And I think they have understood it. So it's been pretty good for me. Like, for example, when I wanted to decide where I wanted to go to college, I wanted to do that by myself. So I took the tours kind of by myself, and it was amazing that my parents, you know, let me do that. But being able to have that conversation and say, you know, like, I just want to feel that experience of being there by myself and seeing what feels the most comfortable for me. And I think being able to elucidate that really helped facilitate the process over the years.
So do you think, I have a follow-up question for you, Kavya. What do you think helped you guys to get to that place, to allow that, you know, that freedom for you to take that? Because Aditya just mentioned, I mean, granted, he's 16 years old, so there's a difference. There's only so much independence he's going to get. But what do you feel was the difference?
To be honest, I think that having a younger sister really helped. My sister and I are very, very different. And so my parents were already kind of adapting to having to be different parents for me versus my sister. And so I think that kind of started the process of, okay, you know, we're getting different signals from each kid and we have to process them differently and respond differently. So I think I've always just been, you know, a little more independent. I think I'm the most, you know, quiet in the family. So I'm not necessarily always laying out my thought processes. And so I think my parents have, you know, slowly understood that about me. And, you know, they might say, oh, you know, we wish you talked more, wish you were like hanging out with the family more when I'm, you know, at home and I'm maybe more quiet. And so I think kind of just those things that they've come to understand. And through these conversations of me, you know, saying, you know, it's not that I'm not involved, I just don't want to speak more, you know, these are kind of the decisions that I just need some time by myself to make. And then, you know, I'm happy to talk about it after. I think those little conversations, and I think time has also really helped with that.
So it's very clear communication is key, as Dr. Lee said earlier. You know, communication is key. So, Savita, you mentioned you had changed a lot over the years, and if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Wow. A lot. I think I was a very conformative kid. Like, I did what my parents told me or even expected me, even if they didn't really put it in words. This country raises kids to think independently, to come on their own and without like really hovering over them. I think I would have changed a lot of the parenting style in terms of like not really pushing them into too many activities, what I did was I introduced them to several activities and then waited to see what they would be interested in. And then I also had this notion that I can't let go of my Indian heritage. So they were doing Carnatic music, they were doing Carnatic violin. They were with a very strict teacher. The teachers over here are not the way Indian teachers are. They did not like that style of instruction. I was not willing to let go, but I think, looking back, I probably would have let them make some of those choices, even though they were very young, and not said, "Hey, you're 6 or you're 7 or you're 8. I know better, right, as a parent, right?" So that's probably some of the things that I would have probably changed.
Balu, I have a different question for you. I'm just wondering, like, what are things that parents can do to begin a difficult conversation? And I'd like, our young panelists also to think about this in the meantime.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think having a difficult conversation really starts well before the conversation, right? I can't have a hard conversation if I've made no investments in conversing previously, right? It's no different from someone with whom we're interacting here as a volunteer or someone with whom we're interacting at work, right? I mean, any HR professional will talk to you about making investments in your work relationship before you have to have a hard conversation. This is no different, right? And so if we can't have routine conversations, right, about something that's common and we can't meet part way, then a difficult conversation, right, is not going to be difficult. It's going to be almost impossible, right? That's so just, building that relationship and getting to know one another and finding common ground, right? Finding something that is important to all of us and figuring out how to make that meaningful, right, opens the door to difficult conversations. And so, just piggybacking on that a little bit, right? Aditya at 16 is more likely, right, to get a longer leash, for lack of a better word, right? If when he's asked to come home at 10, he comes home at 10, right? Then, after a little while, it's going to become 10:30 and 11. But if, when you say you're going to do something, you don't do it, right? Then you're less likely to get more trust, right? And so that kind of bi-directional respect, bi-directional trust, common ground, right, is what opens the door to a more difficult conversation, right? Because you've built a relationship that has a decent foundation, both from a communication perspective, as well as a respect, as well as trust. And I think without some underpinning of communication, trust, and respect, a difficult conversation is no longer difficult, it's impossible.
Aditya, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I honestly, I have to completely agree with that. It's those difficult conversations, they're not just something you can jump right in. And, I'm going through like this kind of almost transformative part of my life where I'm applying to colleges and I can drive and I can do things on my own. I have 2 jobs, so I'm able to like make money and go out with friends and just be slightly more independent. And so, but when I come back to having like these difficult conversations with my parents, if I'm not interacting with them much before, and if they're not, I guess if we're not meeting halfway for the easy stuff, we can't meet halfway for the hard stuff. And I guess that's the easiest way to put it.
How about you, Kavya? Anything more that you'd like to add?
Everything was captured beautifully, but I think the one thing that I add for me personally, I know that, from 10 years ago to now, I think I also just have a better understanding of how much to, there's a give and take in every conversation or every relationship. And I think when I'm younger, it was less understanding of how much I needed to give. And I think that, as I've gotten older, I've understood kind of more where my parents are coming from in certain conversations or certain situations, and thinking that, okay, I need to give them back more, and I think I need to meet them more in the middle, or maybe even more on their side in certain situations. So that flexibility has grown, and I think that that has made those conversations a lot easier.
That's what we call maturity. You know? So happy to hear that. And I think that, you know, when I started out, I said, you know, parenting is just one of those things that you learn as you go along. What Savita said, you know, or what Balu has said. All parents are going to relate to it in some ways. But the idea of all of this is how our goal from this is to learn from each other, learn. And I think parents have a bigger role in the learning, you know, like you're the people in charge. You are the people that are going to shape your children's lives. And something that Aditya said was actually is very important. I know that all parents want to protect their children from any troubles that are out there. You know, learn from my experience. Why do you want to make those mistakes that I've already made? And these are conversations that are happening in every home, you know. And I really think we can learn from that. I mean, this is a conscious thing, right? Maybe Vijay has, or you know of resources that actually offer these. How do you listen? How do you allow children to make mistakes? So it's very hard as a parent to let go, especially when your children are very young. You want to protect them, and you call them helicopter parents, and you do all of these things. You have to know when to let go and let them make the mistakes. And you know, one time I went to meet my son's counselor, and he asked me this question that now it's been so many years, but has remained with me, which is he asked me, he says, hey, Mrs. Kumar, at what point are you willing to let your son make his own decisions and live by the consequences of those decisions? You see, this is a very important, the second part of the question was what gave me pause. And 15 years later, I still remember that. And I was driving back from Berkeley, and I was driving back to my home in San Jose, 1 hour drive. And that entire time, this phrase is going through my head, thinking, but I'm doing the right thing. You know, I mean, it's my kid. I'm the one who will want better for him. But I realized, like, I was still a big part of this college thing, you know, to what's he going to do? What's he going to do? All coming from a place of anxiety. And by the time I arrived home, parked my car in the garage, I said, okay, today was going to be that day. From today, I was going to let my son make his own decisions. He was 18 years old, and live by the consequences of those decisions. And he made a ton load of bad decisions that he had to live with the consequences of that. And I was then it was very hard. And it's very hard to be that parent, let me tell you, when you're seeing your child failing and being quiet about it. It's very hard. But in hindsight, now I can look back and say that only parents can do it, because ultimately you do want the benefit, you know, what's best for your kids. I've done a lot of talking, which I should not do, but you know, I think for the purposes of this discussion, what will be also interesting to understand is what are the cultural differences that parents feel about their kids' upbringing. You know, like, what do you feel is culturally different? The way you were raised, the way you're raising your kids, is it harder, or do you feel that, oh, this was so much easier earlier because I just had to obey my parents and that was it? How about you, Balu? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that. I'd like to share my screen for a second because I saw something this morning. There's an Indian woman who, you know, won a Pulitzer Prize, and this is the text from her dad, right? And she's put it on Twitter, right? That, you know, the dad's response is, "Congratulations, Pulitzer Prize, well done," right? And the reactions are even more powerful. You can turn on. I'll stop sharing here now. Great. You know, that is. I don't know that there's a whole lot more, right, that captures, the experience of the Indian child, right, growing up as a child of immigrants. And so, to answer your question, right, Vandana, I might say, well, it's easier for my kids because, they can find vegetarian food easily, and there are DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion conversations all the time, and so they're able to be who they are, right? So it's easy for me to think I'm being objective, right, and say that. And having said that, right, if you ask them, my son has a 15-year-old a few years ago literally said, "You don't know how hard it is to get up early in the morning," when obviously I've got some practice getting up early in the morning, and Savita, among others, knows because of the timing of when she sends her text messages and when I respond to those text messages, right? She's a late person and I'm an early morning person, right? So objectively, I could say, yes, I know exactly what it's like to get up in the morning, but his version of the story is I have no idea, right? And so I don't know that there's any resolution of that, right? I think that there are some parts that are probably easier. I think that doors have been opened, by the Indians who came to this country, like Dr. Chituri, right, in the 60s. On the other hand, I think the kids are way over-programmed now, right, compared to what I was growing up as a child of immigrants. The number of things that I had after school that my parents enrolled me in versus the number of things that we've got the kids enrolled in, it was a fraction of the stuff that we've got them in now. I had a lot more free time on my hands. And, the number of electronics was not much. Music videos were just starting in the 80s. It was just, so it was the pace of life was very, very different. And so I think that any generation that wants to achieve, right, it's going to be hard. It's just going to be a different kind of hard, right? And once you have, then your stress is different because you're trying to either get freedom or you're trying to preserve what you have. When you don't have, right, then your hard is food, clothing, and shelter. There's nobody who sustainably has an easy life. So I think that's really a difficult question to answer because each individual's perception is their reality. And really, the more we can help appreciate what the other person or what the other generation is going through, then the more likely we are, right, to tear down the walls that are getting in the way and reduce some of the stresses. And, one of the reasons I put that tweet up, right, is we laugh about it, but it's actually really, really important, right, in both directions. It's actually really important, right, that when our kids do well, or even when they do the things we want them to do, which is to work hard, right, and to be good citizens, we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that frequently. And it is a real treat when our kids acknowledge that we did something for them, right? Routinely, our kids will say, thank you for arranging this, right? And that's gold. That's actually an incredibly big deal that they took the time to notice and that they took the time to say that. And so I think those are the little investments that help us appreciate that we're all just trying, right? Like you talked about, Vandana, look, I haven't done this before, right? They haven't been a teen before, and we haven't been a parent of a teen before. We're just trying. And I think if we can, in good faith, appreciate that and just acknowledge this is hard. Achieving is hard, right? Surviving is hard enough. Achieving is even harder. And if we can appreciate, right, that we're all trying to do this together and we're all trying to actually elevate the standard for all of us and enjoy it and taste those fleeting moments of enjoyment, then we can figure out how to have fun together, which ultimately responsibly having fun together, I think is, the optimal way to figure this out.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a very interesting discussion, and I want to be be respectful of the time. So, Desi, can you tell us, do we have more time, or should we just wrap up now?
Yeah, I think we have. You can take about 5 minutes to do, and then I will have Dr. Vijay to wrap up in about 10 minutes.
Sounds good. So just like you have some place to go.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I did just want to say one thing on that last question was that in essence, you know, I'm 16 years old. I was born here, but I was raised in an Indian family, in a Hindu family. And at the end of the day, their culture is my culture. My favorite holiday is Holi. It's not Christmas. I will never forget making 200 gujiyas with my mom late into night while watching the old Indiana Jones movies on a 32-inch box screen TV. Uh, so this culture that I've created, it's a part of me. But the culture that I have with my friends and that I have growing up in the Boy Scouts of America, like it's a completely different thing. But at the end, it's also the same thing because it just makes up who I am. And so yes, there can be conflict at times, but I feel like it overall it creates me for a better individual. I did want to also say thank you all for inviting me. I hope that there's another part of this that I can join and provide more than just a few cents. But this was truly a valuable experience, and I got to hear some amazing perspectives. I hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, and then
Thank you.
good luck to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
We learn when we hear our young people speak, you know, so continue
Absolutely.
to do that, and good luck with everything. So
Thank you.
Kavya,
I just wanted to say, Aditya, I think your parents are going to be very proud of you. I know, as he disappeared.
yeah, and I'm assuming Kavya is still here, and you know, maybe just to wrap up, Kavya, what might be helpful, whether it's, you know, you or you may have seen other parents, what are a few things that we could do differently? Now, you know, you've heard a lot of perspectives from parents, but sometimes it's also helpful to hear because, you know, to say listen is kind of a wide term, you know, and if you have any ideas, like, hey, if you could say that what are two things that immigrant parents, because that's who we are talking about at the moment, with immigrant parents would do or could do differently.
I think one of them is to just be open to everything. I think I was pretty lucky. My parents, when I was younger, kind of just put me in, you know, all kinds of sports, all kinds of activities, and just said, you know, you pick what you want. So the way they phrased it was, you know, you pick like 2 or 3 things that you want to like really focus on, and we'll stick with that. So in a way, kind of pushing me to dedicate my time or try to get really good at, you know, 1 or 2 things, but also giving me the opportunity to really see what's out there, pick what I like, and to make sure that I'm enjoying what I do. And I think that, you know, that really built a great culture with my parents. Another thing that I notice is just in general, like parents, when not comparing kids to other kids, even between me and my sister, you know, we both have our strengths. We both excel in different things. And knowing that and not comparing, you know, my parents don't compare my sister to me, or, you know, if they accidentally slip up and do it, there's that acknowledgement of, okay, you know, like, but here's your strength, and providing that. And also kind of the same across, you know, kids to kids. We all have friends, and I'm sure we've all heard, you know, oh, like X, Y, and Z achieved like or won some big award, you know, and making sure that I think parents know to it's okay to obviously say those things, but make sure you're not comparing your kid to them, because each kid, you know, has their different areas of focus and will exceed in different things. And I think that has built, you know, a great culture of respect with my parents.
Wonderful, wonderful. Savita, you have any, you know, comments that you'd like to wrap this up with?
I think the whole social media thing where parents brag about their kids, and then, you know, the rest of the parents just, you know, kind of go into their shell, and you don't really know what is real and what's not. I think it's time that parents are also real and true to themselves. When they expect something like that from their kids, they also have to be able to confidently portray their what their reality is, and seek the necessary support if needed. Listen to the kids. Definitely not do the comparison thing. Like Kavya was saying, that's a huge thing that we've seen in our community also, and not conform to like, hey, everybody is doing this, so I have to do this. How can my kid, not do this and still be okay, right? So those are the things that I have learned parenting my kids, and I've seen them go through different challenges, and that's the realization. And every time I see somebody post something really great about their family or whatever, on Facebook or any other media, I'm like, I really hope you guys are happy, because if you're portraying this, something like this, that's not false, you're not reaching out to get the help that you need. So that's my 2 cents.
How about you, Balu?
I think the most important thing, right, is just making those investments at home, right? Communication, respect, and trust. I don't think it's ever too late to start. My line of work, right, is terminal patients, and there are people who they won't die. They will hang on comatose for days because they're waiting, and someone has to get on the phone, or someone has to get to that bedside and say, I forgive you, or say, I love you, or say, thank you, or say, I'm sorry. These things last for decades, and they don't need to. We can start today. We can start today by communicating it, and Father's Day doesn't really have to be a special day, right? Like every day should be Father's Day. Every day should be Mother's Day. Every day should be Child's Day, right? Like that communication, respect, and trust, it should start today, and it should be every day. And some days we'll overshoot and we'll screw up. But in good faith, if all of us in every generation makes that investment, we'll be okay.
Thank you. Words of wisdom, and I think a lot of life lessons for all parents to take away from this. Vijay, Dr. Vijay, over to you. Thank you. I want to thank my panelists here today for their candid comments, and I hope that it was helpful for the parents who are listening. Sometimes all you need is one spark, and that's enough to have that open that line of communications if it isn't really open. Just to hear one thing that resonates with another person, then I know that what this conversation that we've had has helped someone. So thank you all.
It's a beautiful conversation. Vandana, very well done. I am so heartened with the honesty, clarity, and openness with which all the panelists spoke. It really feels very, very good. I thank NSF for having such a beautiful setup. So I was thinking that in wrapping up, I should say, I should acknowledge what a difficult conversation this is for the parents. It actually turned out to be beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I think it's very courageous how you all, opened up to everybody. A couple of things I want to say is that the earlier we start, the better it is. From the time the child is very, very young, if we are able to inculcate some of this openness and talking, I remember our dinners used to last 2.5 hours at home. And we used to talk so much of everything under the sun and above it. So that kind of a, atmosphere, if that can be developed, it's just going to be wonderful. Because unless we open up the space, the safe space, like Dr. Balu is saying, we have to talk about sexuality has become such a big topic these days. There are 32 sexual identities, and each kid is talking about his or her sexual identity constantly, and we have to be able to talk about it. There's a lot of bullying in schools. We must make our kids hardier and more resilient. And they must be able to talk to us. When kids come and tell the parents that so-and-so called me a name, parents tend to dismiss it. And another big topic is suicide. We must be able to talk about suicide and how to recognize it. For us to talk about suicide, we must know what mental illnesses are. When I started my organization, Mandarshan, and I called it mental health awareness, my friends called up and said, don't call it mental health. I said, I didn't call it mental illness awareness even. I am calling it mental health. No, the word mental should be removed. So that shouldn't be the case. We should be able to talk about mental health, mental illness, and suicide, and bullying, and sexual identity. All these are bigger topics. When I said these broad boundaries, these are the things we need to be talking about, not, whether somebody wore a sleeveless blouse or, short skirt, or that's not the most important thing. So I think the way to help ourselves is, for example, Khalil Gibran says, our children don't come from us, they come through us. If we're able to keep meditating on that type of a concept, it would be much easier for us to let go of our children. Otherwise, we will not be able to let go. And one other thing, I don't know if you've read the book Excellent Sheep by William Dershowitz. What he says is that Indian Asian parents, not just them in general, they prepare their children for college admission board. If the college admission board says you need to have an instrument, they'll all learn instruments. If they say you need to have community service hours, they'll all have community service hours. Whatever the admission board is looking for, they prepare their kids for that. So he says these kids come here all brilliant, all well-rounded, all smart. But after 4 years of college, they don't know what to do. They're trying to find themselves at that time. So he says they don't know themselves because you're just so, so one directional. So these are the things I think we really need to talk about. When I was talking to my son about this, hey Ravi, what do you think is important? He told me that, Amma, give us an impression that you were a kid once, and you made mistakes, and that you're human. If you can tell us that, I'll be okay being a human and being a kid and making the mistakes. So that's what he told me, and I thought that was I felt quite moved by that. I'm glad we are opening up this channel to talk about these things in this webinar. We know that despite all this, parents come from a very good place. They have the best of intentions, and so do the kids. So both are coming from a place of good faith. I do want the parents to take the first step and ask the questions and how to go about this. I think there is a space for both the cultures, for us to have a dialogue to get the two cultures, what is good in both of them, and incorporate it in our lives. And I'm really thankful for NorthSouth Foundation for doing this. I hope to see you guys again.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, Dr. Prasad Kaipa is on the wings for quite a while, so I would like him to say a few words.
I really appreciate the panelists and the moderator for doing a wonderful job of initiating this webinar series. We are calling it a series because, when we talk about so many competitions, life skills, and everything for children, we thought this is a wonderful place to start conversations on how to bridge the generation gap. So as Dr. Vijay as well as Vandana and panelists have mentioned, the initiative can be taken by the parents. But when we have these seminars, like hopefully once a month or once in 6 weeks, we will have more. We would love for both parents and the youngsters to send comments, suggestions, and topics on how to bridge the generation gap. If you can send vignettes or specific issues that we need to address, that will be wonderful. So we look forward to seeing more participation and more openness. And hopefully, if you have attempted to practice some of the suggestions that have been given tonight, or rather this morning, I should say, I think I have been moving in and out of time zones. And if you can send something, that will be great. And finally, I'd love to thank Sai Rachakonda for suggesting this topic. I think that's great that he identified in the not just North-South parents, but Indian Americans. I think we need to address the issue of communication, the issue of relationships, and how do we build it in such a way that it will become a lasting foundation for love, respect, and communication, and finally trust, as Dr. Balu mentioned. And I also appreciate all the conversations we had with the panelists, moderator, Dr. Chitturi, Rao Chalasani, and everybody else. I look forward to more participation as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody for attending. I'm sorry we ran over our allotted time, but still the information was so much potent, and we should, like I said, this is the first step of the process we are undertaking, and then we want to continue talking about it periodically with the various guests, various webinar sessions, talks, or even a smaller workshop sessions with the parents and the kids, and communicate the importance to everybody. So please support this effort and then help us out in participating, and also making this a priority in your life.